Good morning, everybody. Today, we will have a novel, The Prisoner of Zenda. We will talk about the theme of wisdom and the character of Sabt. Sabt was so wise. He helped Rasandal and protected and wanted to protect him. When he first saw Rasandal, he didn't want him to go to the coronation as it might be dangerous. When the king was dragged, he asked Rasandal to take the king's place to prevent Michael from being the king. Also, he refused to bring the doctor or sent a message that the king was ill and he couldn't come to the coronation. The people would be angry because this is not the first time that he has been ill. And they all know what it means. Michael knew that the people would be angry. He hoped that they would make him king instead. But Sabt would rather die than serve King Michael. He told Rasandal all about the king's life and the coronation. He also told him about the king's friends and enemies. He stayed close to Rasandal to tell him what to do. After the coronation, he told the friends that no one could see the king until 9 o'clock tomorrow, not even Duke Michael. Sabt proved that if they told the people the track that they played, they would kill them, and they wouldn't accept the king who was too drunk to be crowned and send somebody else to take his place. They will rebel against King Radolf and make Black Michael king in his place. But if Rasindel went back, Michael wouldn't be able to betray him unless he uncovered his wicked character to the people. They have kidnapped the king and murdered his servant. Rasindel had to agree and accept to be the king again because Sabt was right. Also for Flavia, she was wise. She warned Rasindel, the king, to be careful and to watch his brother Michael. I hope that you will keep a better watch on Michael because he is more dangerous than you think. This is the quotation that she said for him. Also, we have many messages in the novel. For example, the first message, Michael sent a bottle of wine as a message of love for the king, but it was a drugged bottle of wine. He wanted to prevent the king from the coronation ceremony. The second one, the Marshal, gave Radolf the king a message from Duke Michael. Michael was ill and hadn't been able to come to the station, but he would see the king before the coronation. Also, Michael has had a message from Zenda. He looked angry when he read it. All is well. This message means that Michael's men took the king as a prisoner in the castle in Zenda, but Michael was shocked and angry when he saw that the king in the coronation, as he didn't know that it wasn't the king, it was Rasindel. So he traveled to Zenda to find out what happened. Flavia sent a messenger to ask if the king was well. She loved him. Henzo met Rasindel to tell him a message from the Duke as he was sorry and he couldn't come to meet Rasindel in Zenda because he was ill. So we have wisdom and messages in the beginning. Also, after that, we will have a discussion about the common part, which is summary for chapters 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7 till 10. We will start from chapter 6, the summary. We know that Sabt received the news of the prisoner in the castle of Zenda and relayed the information to Radolf. It was said that the drawbridge was only lowered when the Duke of Strelso ordered it. Otherwise, there was no traffic allowed into or out of the castle. Sabt and Radolf were discussing the castle. A letter was delivered. While they were talking, there is a letter came for them. Who sent this letter? Antoinette de Maubin. Why did Antoinette send this letter? To invite Radolf to meet her in the summer house. The letter was written and signed by Antoinette de Maubin, but Michael asked her to write the letter. Sabt tried to pursue Radolf not to meet the woman, but Radolf insisted on going to this meeting. When Radolf arrived at the summer house, Antoinette dragged him in and explained that she had been ordered by the Duke to write the letter, that 3 men were on their way to kill him. Michael had a plan. The 3 men would murder Radolf, and Sabt and Fred would be arrested for his murder. So what is the plan of Michael? Michael planned that when the 3 men of the 6 men, 3 of the 6 would come to kill the king, to kill Rasindel. After they kill him, he would arrest Sabt and Fred, as they were accused of what? Killing the king. Then what will happen? He would kill the real king and he would be the king of Ruritania. يبقى the plan again, 3 of his men would kill Rassendyll, then he would arrest Sabt and Fritz for killing the king, then he would kill the real king in the castle of Zenda, and after that he would be the king of Ruritania. When the 3 men came, they spoke to Radolf through the closed door and ordered Radolf a safe exit to the border with 50,000 English pounds. They then flung open the door and fired their revolvers. When the door opened, they fired their revolvers on Rassendyll. But Radolf Rassendyll protected himself and Antoinette with the tea table. He had a tea table and put the tea table in front of the pulse that come from their revolvers. He rushed through the door and made his escape. So he tried this day to escape from them, and he was lucky to do that. He escaped from the 3 men. The prefect of the Ruritanian police sent Radolf a report on the condition of the capital and the mood of the people every day. One afternoon, Radolf read that the king was being criticized for not offering Flavia his hand in marriage. It was reported that Princess Flavia was deeply offended by the king's thoughtlessness and was considering marrying Michael. People now were talking that the king didn't tell Flavia that he wanted to marry her, and nothing was about his marriage from Princess Flavia. So they were talking about that, and maybe Michael marry her. And Radolf was sad about that, and he wanted to try to do something, but he couldn't, as we know, because he is not the real king. So Fritz confirmed that announcement of the king's engagement would be made at the Grand Hall. So they will try to make an engagement in the party between Rassendyll and Flavia. Radolf and Flavia danced together at the pool, and Radolf knew that he was falling in love with the princess. The princess confessed that she had loved him since the coronation. This means that she loved Radolf Rassendyll and was looking forward to the time that they were married. The morning after the ball, Radolf made plans to return to Zenda to rescue the king from the castle. Radolf told Princess Flavia that he was going on a hunting trip to hunt wild boar. She begged him not to go. He gave in and told her that he was going after Michael. He left instructions with her that if anything should happen to him and he didn't return, that she would have to be the ruler of Ruritania. To reign Ruritania, she will be what? The queen of Ruritania. She would be the only remaining member of the house of the Elfberg. The hunting party left Strelsum and traveled to Chateau, about 5 miles away from Zenda. Not long after Radolf had arrived, Robert Henzo came with a message from Mike. He begged the king's pardon for not receiving him at the castle because there is feather in the castle and it's not safe for the king to come to the castle. Radolf knew there was no disease and that he was invited to the castle because he wasn't invited to the castle because the king was being held prisoner there. In front of people, you should have a reason that there is illness, so you can't come to the castle. But you know that you couldn't come to the castle because the king is prisoner there. The night, Radolf and Fritz rode into the town of Zenda and made arrangements with the serving girl at the end to meet with Johann. By the way, I can't pronounce it Johann or Johann. Johann because if I said it in the German way. The only servant working at the castle, they needed information about the king's whereabouts and wanted to know who was guarding him. The following morning, Robert arrived at the chateau again with another offer from Michael. What was the offer? This time, the offer was for safe passage across the border and 1,000,000 crowns. Robert was not surprised when Radolf refused the offer. Robert Henzo, one of Michael's men, knew that Rassendyll would refuse the offer and began to leave the chateau. He put on his hand to Radolf in friendship. When Radolf refused to shake the man's hand, Robert swung his dagger through the air and struck Radolf in his left shoulder. So he threw a dagger on Rassendyll, and the dagger came in his left shoulder. It missed Radolf's heart. And he staggered back. Robert galloped away. He ran away with the horse. Sapt and Fritz tended to the wound, and when Radolf awoke later that night, he met once again with Johann. Why did he want to meet Johann? to take information from him about the castle of Zenda and the king and what happened there. Johann was very happy to trade information for money and safe passage out of Zenda. He told them all about the castle security and the plans that Michael had to get rid of the king. Michael had a plan if they attack the castle. There is a moat in the castle, as we know, so he had a pipe from the window in the king's room to the moat. If anyone attacked the castle, he would kill the king and throw the body of the king from the pipe into the moat. The other end was in the moat, as we know. When the king was finally killed, his body would be placed into the pipe where it would slide to the bottom of the moat. Because of his wound, Radolf sent 2 days with Flavia. During that time, the Marshal urged Radolf to marry the princess quickly and secure the crown, making sure that the country wouldn't be left in the hands of Black Michael. Radolf wanted to desperately to marry Flavia, but he wanted to do as it's Radolf Rassendel, not as the king of Bretagne. He wanted to marry Flavia, but he couldn't because he was not the real king. He wanted to marry her as Radolf Rassendel, not as Radolf, the king of Bretagne. Radolf was well enough to attempt to rescue the king from the castle of Zenda after resting for 2 days. On reaching the castle, the first thing that Radolf saw was a guard in a small rowboat close to the pipe. Realizing that the man was sleeping, Radolf swam to the boat, took out his knife, and killed the man. He then made his way back to the pipe, where he heard the Englishman Ditchard speaking to the king. As Ditchard left his majesty, Radolf heard the sound of the door being bolted and the king crying in despair. As Radolf made his way to the other side of the moat, he heard the sound of gunfire. Radolf's men had caught up with some followers of Michael and they were engaged in battle. Robert, Sept, and Fred ran to help them. As a horse galloped by, Radolf reached for the bridle. Slowing the horse down on top of the horse was Robert Henzo, who slashed once again at Radolf. This time was his sword, and then leaped into the cold water of the moat and swam to the corner of the castle. The following day, the prefect of police visited Radolf, saying that he had received a request for help from the British ambassador. They were asking about an Englishman who was missing and hadn't been seen for 2 months since his arrival in Zenda. The Englishman was, of course, Radolf Rassendel. Radolf was surprised at this news because he didn't think that anyone would notice his disappearance. Radolf agreed to help the perfect search for the missing man, but instructed him to tell the ambassador that they needed another week or 2 to come up with results. On returning to the chateau, Radolf found a note from Antoinette de Maubin begging him to rescue her from the castle. Radolf could see no way to rescue either the king or Antoinette de Maubin. Security had been increased around the castle since the last rescue attempt. The villagers were saying that the prisoner was becoming sicker each day. The Duke sent for a doctor to examine the king. He kept the doctor prisoner in the castle as well. So Michael had a prisoner. The prisoner was ill, so he asked for a doctor to come, and the doctor was kept as a prisoner also with the king. For all the information had given, Radolf promised Johann 20,000 crowns, but offered to increase it to 50,000 if Johann helped them rescue the king. Johann was to pass a note to Antoinette de Maubin containing instructions for her to follow when the rescue attempt began. They were ready to put their elaborate plan into action, and if Radolf hadn't returned by morning, Marshal was to go to the castle and demand to see the king. If Michael is not at the castle, then the Marshal would tell everyone that the king's brother's betrayal and the likely death of the king. Radolf seriously believed that neither Michael nor the king would live past that night. That night, Radolf arrived on the outskirts of the forest, tied his horse to a tree, took his revolver from his saddlebag, and slid silently into the cold water. What will happen in the last part in the novel? What will happen after the plan? They planned to attack now, and he sent a note to Antoinette de Maubin. What will happen in the coming part? This is what we will know in the last part in the novel. But I hope that you study the wisdom and the character of Sap, and also you study the messages that we discussed in the first part, and you could read the chapters from the novel and study the summary well. Thank you for today. See you in the coming part, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.